The success of Louis Jordan and his hard-swinging smallheads helped jump blues really take off during the 40s. One of jump's first strongholds was the West Coast, which had become a hotbed of musical activity by the end of World War II. Unlike the Jim Crow South, California represented a cultural melting pot, with inhabitants that were more open to new musical horizons. The focal point of the West Coast scene was Central Avenue, located in the hearts of southern Los Angeles, only now getting its due as LA's version of New York's 52nd Street. Central Avenue was the breeding ground for a range of post-war sounds that ranged from swing to beat bop and jump blues. Central Avenue was just one of many Southern California hotspots for R&B. Up in Hollywood, there was Wallach's Music at the corner of Hollywood and the Vine, where a band could walk in and record a demo on the spot. Although Capitol wasn't considered an R&B label per se, it had its share of important blues artists in the 1940s, including Nat King Cole, T-Bone Walker, Nellie Lucha, Julia Lee and Blue Lou Barker. In 1948, Roy Porter put together his own big band, the 17 Bebopsters. This band introduced several important LA musicians, including trumpeter Art Farmer, saxophonist Eric Dolphy, and pianist Hampton Hawes. This band's recordings featured elements of swing, beat bop, and the new sound of jump blues. Johnny Otis was another great West Coast drummer and bandleader who bridged the gap from jump blues to R&B. For over 50 years, he successfully spread the message of R&B first as a player and then as a bandleader, an A&R man, label owner, DJ and promoter. In 1949, Otis signed with Savoy Records and quickly found success with Double Crossin' Blues. It was one of the 10 hits that Otis would place in the R&B top 10 in 1950 alone. As a seeker of new talent, Johnny Otis was peerless. His discoveries included some of the biggest stars in R&B: Jackie Wilson, Little Willie John, Hank Ballard, Little Esther Phillips, The Robins and Etta James. From 1951 to 1953, Otis was an A&R, artist and repertoire man, for the Houston-based Duke Peacock labels. The song Hound Dog was co-written by up-and-coming songwriters Jerry Liebler and Mike Stoller, still teenagers in 1950 when they first approached Johnny Otis to help them find the right artist to record it. The team of Liebler and Stoller would go on to pen many of great classics of 50s R&B and early rock and roll, including Jailhouse Rock, Stand By Me, Yakety Yak, Poison Ivy, Smokey Joe's Cafe and Under the Boardwalk. In 1957, at the height of the rock and roll craze, Johnny Otis signed with Capitol Records and recorded his biggest hit, Willie in the Hand Drive, featuring Johnny on vocals and the great El Palma. In the 70s and 80s, former R&B stars like Louis Jordan and Roy Milton found a new home in Otis's own label, Giant T Records. At the time of this writing, Otis was still broadcasting a weekly R&B show from the San Francisco Bay Area. Sharkey Hall was an early LA pioneer who recorded with Johnny Guitar Watson and Plas Johnson, among others. Rabin Tarrant, a fine singer in his own right, played with many West Coast greats, including Jack McVeigh, whose novelty hit Open the Door Richard was one of the best sellers of 1946. Tarrant's jump-style shuffles are found on the CD McVitie's Central Avenue Blues. Tarrant was also recorded with Bryony Harris, Big Joe Turner and guitarist T-Bone Walker. Nathaniel Monk McVeigh and Preston Pepe Prince are both known for their work with jump veteran Joe Liggins. That's Prince on Liggins' biggest hit, The Honey Dripper, available on Legends of Specialty, Joe Liggins and the Honey Dripper, 1989, Specialty Records. Robert Snake Sims recorded with many blues and soul legends, including artists T-Bone Walker and Laurel Wilson. try the very best of T-Bone Walker from 200 Koch Records. Henry Tucker Green, well known for West Coast session drumming, played both jazz and R&B. He recorded with the likes of Gerard Wilson, Helen Humes and Lester Young before moving on to a hugely successful career in the 50s with proto-rockers The Trainers. Leonard Tate Hardiman and Darryl Bilton Cole kept up the frantic pace behind LA Sax honker Big J McNeely. Big J's style was as close to punk or speed metal as the 50s ever got. Jesse Sales was one of the top drummers on the West Coast R&B scene in the 50s, doing sessions for Amos Milburn, Elmer James, Big Joe Turner, The Coasters, B.B. King and many others. Sales continued recording well into the 70s and can be heard on the pop classic Let's Dance by Chris Montes, as well as the novelty Monster Mash. Other West Coast drummers who contributed to the R&B scene include Chuck Thompson, Leon Pettis, Oscar Lee Bradley and Lee Young, who is brother to sax legend Lester Young. During the swing era, band leaders, soloists and arrangers dominated pop music, while singers, often called thrushes or canaries, genuinely sat only in for a few numbers. The strike by the Musicians' Union that began in 1942 kept all instrumentalists and bands out of recording studios for nearly 2 years. Since this ban did not apply to vocalists, as they had a different union, record labels took advantage of the situation by more aggressively promoting singers. By the end of this decade, vocal tunes had become the focal point of pop music, while instrumental numbers increasingly ended up in the novelty category. Guitarists had been experimenting with amplification since the 20s, but it was not until Charlie Christian used an electric six-string with the Benny Goodman sextet in 1939 that the idea caught on big. Electric guitars became more dominant a force in the music in the 40s, mainly because the demise of the big bands created need to fill out the sound. Within a few short years, the electric guitar had joined the honking sax as one of the trademark instruments of R&B, and it would go on to become the most important instrument associated with rock and roll. Its popularity led to the development of both electric bass and piano in the 50s. A trademark guitar artist was a man by the name of T-Bone Walker. His fearsome licks and dazzling showmanship defined the modern conception of a lead guitarist and strongly influenced future generations from B.B. King to Eric Clapton. In the world of wind instruments, the saxophone was a latecomer to the game. Created in the mid-1800s, its harsh tone made it more popular with military bands than with orchestras. When jazz became more sophisticated in the 20s and 30s, players like Coleman Hawkins and Lester Young brought a smoother, more controversial tone to the sax. Making it sound more like a human voice, this approach helped redefine the saxophone, and by the 40s it had become a more popular instrument in jazz. Louder volumes and heavier grooves forced saxophones to push boundaries of what was possible on their instrument. One of the most prominent sax players in early R&B was Illinois Jacquet. Jacquet's playing drove audiences into a frenzy and was so popular that it spawned an entire generation of sax players who specialised in honking. And that's all for today. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.